Welcome back to the daily Living Jewish Kitzur Shulchan Aruch class. We are up to section 69 of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. We are learning about the laws of Mincha. And yesterday we began by discussing firstly the importance of specifically the prayer of Mincha, how it comes in the middle of the day. How we got to pull ourselves away from whatever we're busy with and remind ourselves about our service of Hashem. We spoke about the time of Mincha from around 3:30. It could also be done earlier from around 12:30 up until sunset, or even later if it wasn't done before sunset. We spoke to how you shouldn't engage in any activities before davening Mincha, unless you're davening with a minyan at a set time, in which case you would be allowed to sit down for a less formal meal. We spoke about how you need to wash your hands before davening Mincha, how when the shul comes together, they should wait till they have a minyan before they start Ashrei, so that the Kaddish that's recited before the Amidah can be said on a prayer that was said together with the minyan. If a minyan wasn't present, then you would say another passage of Tehillim before Kaddish. We spoke about how sometimes if time is running out, instead of everybody first doing a silent Amidah and then the Chazan repeating the whole thing, what you can have is the Chazan can start his silent Amidah aloud. Everybody waits to start their silent Amidah until he reaches the end of the third blessing in Kedusha, and then you go ahead and do your silent Amidah. This is called the Heicha Kedusha. We spoke most recently about what happens if you come late to shul. Let's take a look at that again. So there's a few scenarios. So if you come late to shul, and they're already starting the Amidah, so he says start with the Amidah, and you could catch up Ashrei afterwards. As I mentioned, the Chabad community, we're particular about always davening in order, but in other communities, this is what you'll do. You'll join in the minyan for Shmona Esrei, and then you'll catch up the Ashrei afterwards. However, if they're already deep into the Amidah, and if you start the silent Amidah now, you're going to actually miss the opportunity to say Kedusha with the Chazan. Then, if you're able to wait until he first does the repetition of the Amidah and then daven, then that's great. But if by then the sun will already set, it'll be too late for Mincha, then what you could do is you could wait till the Chazan begins the repetition of the Amidah and say the Amidah word for word together with him. He says it aloud and you say it softly. That way you will you'll be able to answer Kedusha because you'll be in the correct place in davening to do so. So that's what you do under that circumstance. So again, if you come late to shul, if you'll be able to do the silent Amidah before the Chazan begins the repetition, then go ahead and do that. If not, then say your silent Amidah together with the Chazan's repetition. And then when he reaches the place of Kedusha, you would be able to say Kedusha since you are in the correct point in the davening. And then you would continue davening by yourself or alongside him so that you would be able to do Moedim, bow at the same time that he does Moedim. Although he said if there's a special edition for a fast where there's an extra prayer that is inserted by the Chazan, you obviously wouldn't say that because you aren't the Chazan. This prayer is only inserted as an independent prayer by the Chazan. Same goes for Ma'ariv. So if you want to daven Ma'ariv together with the minyan, and if you're going to wait to daven Mincha until afterwards, then you're going to miss out on davening Ma'ariv. So like nowadays, where in Great Park, for example, they daven Ma'ariv straight after Mincha. So if you're going to daven Mincha afterwards because you want to be able to answer Kedusha, then you're going to miss out on Ma'ariv. So then again, what you could do is you could say the silent Amidah alongside the Chazan, reading from your place, while he says it aloud, you could say it at the same time, word for word, softly. Okay. Or another option is as soon as you've heard him saying Hakel HaKadosh, which is the end of the third blessing, and you've answered Kedusha, then you could go back and begin your own davening. You're going to miss the opportunity to do moedim, to bow together with the minyan, but at least you had the opportunity to do kedusha with the minyan, and you'll still be able to daven moedim with the minyan. Here's an interesting scenario. If you only ended up davening mincha once it was already night, if it's too late, then it's too late. But if it was already late, it was maybe after sunset, then you don't say the tachanun prayer, the confession prayer, because confession is not said at night. Okay. Also, if your mincha goes way too late, then you won't be able to say the full kaddish because it will already be the next day. Because it's already once it's fully night, then you're on to the next day, and that kaddish is going on the prayer that you just said for the day before. Here's another unique scenario. You arrive in Shul on a Friday, and you need to daven mincha, but they're already up to Baidiv. So if you answer Baruch Hu to the Chazan, so by answering Baruch Hu, then you're accepting that it's already Shabbos. If you're already accepting it's already Shabbos, then it means it's already night. If it's night, it's too late to daven mincha, but you haven't yet daven mincha. So what should you do? You should not answer Baruch Hu after the Chazan until you have first gone ahead and daven mincha, so that you still keep your daytime. We're talking about obviously when the minyan davens early. So it's like now in the summer when the sun hasn't yet set, but they've accepted Shabbos early, so you don't want to accept Shabbos together with them because it'll be too late for you to daven mincha. So what you do is you don't answer Baruch Hu with the minyan, which begins night, and that way you're able to still daven mincha, since after all the sun hasn't yet set, and only after davening mincha you'll go ahead and daven the Ma'ariv prayer. If you did answer Baruch Hu, then you've lost the opportunity to daven mincha, and instead you'll need to make it up by doing an extra Friday night Amidah. Although this is up for debate. Some opinions say that you still would be able to daven mincha, since after all it is light outside. But the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says that once you've answered Baruch Hu, it is too late. That brings us to the end of the laws of mincha. Maybe just to take a few moments, today is the 19th of Kislev. The 19th of Kislev is a day of great celebration in the Hasidic calendar. It's the day that the first Chabad Rebbe was released from jail. Okay, we're going to find out what he was doing in jail. And his predecessor, his teacher, the Maggid's passing was also on this day, the 19th of Kislev. What was the Alter Rebbe doing in jail? So when his teacher's teacher, the Baal Shem Tov, began to teach the teachings of Hasidus, there was a heavy opposition from many Torah authorities. There were great Torah leaders that felt that Hasidus was another alternative, something that's rather than something that will bring people closer to Hashem and closer to the performance of Torah and mitzvahs. They felt it was like another form of reform that would actually divert people away from God, away from the study of Torah and fulfillment of mitzvahs. They felt it was maybe a deviation, these Torah sages. And therefore, they launched an opposition to the Hasidic movement. They felt that the Hasidic movement was dangerous for the Jewish world. It became very heated, intense, to the point that the great Torah sage of the time actually placed the Alter Rebbe in a cherem. He was excommunicated by the non-Hasidic Torah leaders because they felt that he needs to be completely removed from the Jewish community. He was a danger to society. A couple of generations down the line, we see that that on the contrary, certainly this wasn't chas v'shalom another faction of reform or a deviation, but all of the teachings of Hasidus are only there to give a person an added joy and excitement and enthusiasm in the fulfillment of Torah and mitzvahs. But at the time, this wasn't clear to them. The Alter Rebbe tried to meet with the great Torah sages, but they refused to see him, based on also a number of false rumors they had heard about him, which the story grew, it got out of hand. And so strong was the opposition that they got hold of a sum of money, a check that the Alter Rebbe had sent to Israel, to the amount of, I don't know how much, but if it was 1,000 rubles, they added a kuf at the beginning, which turned it into 100,000 rubles. and gave it to the Russian authorities and told the Russian authorities that this Jewish leader is taking huge volumes of Russian money and funding your enemies, because at the time, the Turks, the Ottoman Empire, were actually at war with the Russians. And the Ottoman Empire controlled Israel at the time. So by the Alter Rebbe sending money to help the early settlements, we're talking about now in the 1800s, and establishing Jewish communities in Israel, the opposition actually got a hold of that and told the government that he's guilty of treason, he's guilty of counter-revolutionary activity. He's taking Russian funds and he's funding your enemy. And he was in jail, in prisons. He was taken to jail. While in jail, the Alter Rebbe was met by his teachers. They came to visit him. They had already passed away, but they found a way of coming to visit him. And he asked them, what am I doing here? Why in heaven has it been decided? Everything that happens is by hashgacha practice, by divine decree. So why in heaven has it been decided that I should be in jail? And his teachers told him that there is a heavenly decree against you. Why? Because you are taking these sacred teachings of Hasidus and you are spreading them amongst the masses. He said, okay, should I stop? They said, no. You've been vindicated. On the contrary, it's been decided in heaven that it's been argued that not only are you allowed to share these teachings, but you should disseminate them with greater excitement. And this day that the Alter Rebbe was freed from jail became a day of celebration for all of the hundreds of Hasidic communities all across Poland and Russia, Ukraine, Lithuania, all of the countries at the time, Russia, White Russia. It became a day of celebration amongst all the Hasidic communities, a day that they celebrated that in heaven it had been decided that the Alter Rebbe's teachings should go forth and be taught with greater excitement. And it in fact became accepted as the Rosh Hashanah, the new year of Hasidus. It became accepted as a day that we're able to look ahead at the whole year ahead and see how we can invigorate our performance of mitzvahs and our Torah study with the energy of the teachings of Hasidus. So that's today. It's a very special day. It's a big Hasidic Yom Tov. So I'll take this opportunity to wish you each to be inspired and sealed for a year filled with learning Hasidic ideas and going in the ways of Hasidus, which are all there to help us develop a closer relationship with Hashem and preparing us to be able to bring the era of Mashiach